Hey guys. Tonight we drift back to the smoky hush after a medieval battlefield, where the air tastes of iron and ash. And the crows are already circling. Impatient dinner guests waiting for the feast of the fallen. You stand there, in the middle of it all. Your breath shallow, your boots sinking into mud that's more red than brown. Around you, the victorious soldiers move like tired wolves, some laughing, some crying, some just staring blankly at the horizon, pretending they can still smell glory. You can't tell if the silence is peaceful or horrifying. Probably both. Somewhere, a lute tries to play. But the string snaps, almost like the world itself sighing in exhaustion. You, meanwhile, are simply trying to understand what happens next, especially to the women left behind. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes here, no Wi-Fi, no coffee, and absolutely no human rights hotline. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The smoke hangs low, thick as soup, and as you walk through it, you hear women's voices, not shouting, not yet, just a trembling murmur. Some are calling for husbands who will never answer. Others are whispering prayers that sound more like apologies. You follow the sound until you see them, clusters of women wrapped in torn shawls, holding children who have stopped crying out of sheer exhaustion. They're waiting for help, for mercy, for someone to tell them what comes next. But mercy isn't part of the medieval vocabulary tonight. A group of victors passes by, their armor clanging like coins in a gambler's cup. They look at the women the way a merchant looks at livestock, with calculation. Not cruelty, though sometimes the two are indistinguishable. There's a quiet sorting taking place. Noblewomen are identified and guarded. Peasant women are ignored until someone decides they're useful. You can almost hear the unspoken rule echo through the smoky air. The spoils of war belong to the victors, even the breathing ones. A young woman kneels by a fallen man, brushing dust from his hair. He's not moving, but she keeps whispering his name, as if sheer repetition might pull him back. A soldier stops beside her. You hold your breath, maybe he'll help. He doesn't. He just glances at her, then at the ring on her finger, then takes the ring. For the king, he mutters, though everyone knows kings already have too much gold. You wonder how often history repeated this same scene, thousands of fields, thousands of mornings after. The chronicles always talk about who won, who lost, and which castle changed hands. They rarely mention the women who woke up to find that their entire lives had become someone else's property. The thing is, women of defeated warriors occupied a strange, fragile category. Not exactly prisoners, not exactly survivors. They were proof of victory, living trophies that reminded everyone who was strong and who wasn't. Some would be forced to serve in the victors' camps, others would vanish. Names swallowed by mud and time. Some historians still argue about whether this treatment was a product of cruelty or of custom, as if tradition makes suffering any less painful. You glance toward the edge of the battlefield where smoke gives way to a makeshift camp. There, a few women tend to the wounded. Regardless of sides. It's strange, compassion surviving among ashes. One of them hums a lullaby while tying a bandage on a stranger's arm. The soldier doesn't even ask her name. He'll probably never remember her face. But for that moment, her hands are steady, and the world feels almost humane. A gust of wind rolls across the plain, stirring ashes like snowfall. The smell is a mix of sweat, blood, and wet earth. You pull your cloak tighter, not that it helps. You can feel the weight of history pressing down, whispering, "This is what happens when glory meets reality." You pass by a soldier sitting on a broken shield, staring at his hands. He's muttering something under his breath, not a prayer, but guilt disguised as exhaustion. Behind him, a woman is gathering bodies into rows. She moves methodically, pausing to close each man's eyes before covering him with a tattered cloak. Maybe one of them was her husband. Maybe all of them could have been. Someone nearby laughs, a loud, jarring sound in this graveyard of echoes. You look over and see two men arguing over a piece of jewelry. "It's silver," one says. "No, tin." They laugh again. "It's absurd. Really, human pettiness surviving even when humanity itself is in ruins." You think of modern times, how people still scroll past headlines about refugees, widows, and collateral damage without blinking. It's the same story, only with better lighting and faster updates. As twilight deepens, you find yourself standing at the edge of a ruined village. The houses look like broken teeth, blackened by fire. The women who lived here are nowhere to be seen. Some were taken, others ran into the forests, hoping the night would hide them. You can still hear a few distant screams, sharp, then fading. You tell yourself they're echoes. But echoes don't tremble like that. A stray dog sniffs at a fallen banner and whines softly. You kneel to pat its head. At least someone's still gentle in this mess. The dog looks up at you, eyes full of confusion, maybe hope. You wish you could promise it a better tomorrow. In the dim glow of dying fires, you see one more thing, a small child, maybe 3 or 4, clutching a woman's scarf. The child doesn't cry. Children in war zones learn early that silence is safer. You pick up the scarf. It smells of smoke and lavender. The woman it belonged to might be miles away, or nowhere at all. You close your eyes for a moment and try to imagine her story. Maybe she was a healer. Maybe she used to sing. Maybe she once believed love could survive battlefields. The night deepens. Somewhere, a bell tolls, not for the dead, but for what's left of the living. You realize this is just the beginning. The aftermath isn't a pause, it's a different kind of war. One fought in whispers, hunger, and fear. As you step away from the battlefield, the smoke starts to thin. You think you can almost see stars behind it, faint, trembling, but there. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to keep walking. The night stretches long, and by the time dawn begins to bleed over the horizon, the battlefield no longer looks like a place of glory, just a field of debts unpaid. You walk through what's left, broken shields, shattered lances, and the quiet shapes of those who won't rise again. But the war doesn't end when the swords are sheathed, it just changes costume. Now it wears the face of survival, especially for the women who were left behind when their men didn't return. The first campfires of the victors flicker in the distance. Soldiers sit around them, bragging, laughing, sometimes crying into their hands when no one looks. You drift closer, not to the men, but to the edge, where the captives are kept. There's a fence of rope and spears. Behind it, a cluster of women, some trembling, others still too numb to move. They look at one another as if searching for instructions in each other's eyes. One woman whispers, "If you cry, they notice you. If you stare, they hit you. Best to look at the ground." It's advice passed down like an heirloom from one defeated generation to the next. You realize something cruelly efficient about medieval warfare. It didn't end at victory. The sorting began afterward. Men took spoils, commanders took titles, kings took land, and women became bargaining chips for all three. A soldier, young, with the haunted eyes of someone who's seen too much, approaches the prisoners. He tosses a crust of bread through the fence. It lands in the dirt. The women don't move. He waits, smirks, and walks away. Only when he's gone does one of them crawl forward and pick it up, breaking it carefully into smaller pieces. You watch her pass each crumb to the others, not taking one for herself. You've never seen dignity wear such ragged clothes. Further down, a commander paces like a merchant inspecting wares. He calls out names of villages, asking who belongs where, who can sew, who can cook, who's of noble blood. The women answer quietly, aware that every word might decide whether they live in a tent, a kitchen, or a cage. One of them lies, says she's from a noble family. You can hear the tremor in her voice, but it's convincing enough. The commander looks her up and down, then nods. "You'll be taken to the castle. We need hostages of status." Her relief is brief. A different kind of captivity is still captivity. You almost want to tell her that her lie was smart, that sometimes pretending to be someone else is the only way to stay alive. But your voice wouldn't reach her. History's too thick a wall for that. Nearby, an older woman tends to a wounded knight. Her husband, she says, was killed defending the same banner this knight fought under. Now she cleans his wounds as though trying to mend her own fate. When he winces, she whispers, "It hurts less if you breathe slowly." He nods, neither of them realizing that centuries later, soldiers and medics will say the same thing. A sudden shout cuts through the morning air. A woman has tried to run. The men catch her quickly. No one escapes barefoot through mud. The commander scolds her like a child. Says she's lucky this isn't the old empire where they cut off hands for less. She spits at his feet. For a heartbeat, everything freezes. Then a soldier backhands her. Hard. The sound echoes, a flat, ugly punctuation mark in the silence. You close your eyes. When you open them again, she's on the ground, staring blankly at the sky. There's defiance in her gaze still. Even through tears, you whisper, though no one can hear, "Don't let them take that from you." It's strange how quickly normality resumes. The camp continues to move, to eat, to trade jokes. A man jokes that the defeated women are lucky to be spared. Another laughs too loudly, maybe to drown out the part of himself that knows better. Some historians still debate whether these scenes were exceptions or the rule. But when stories repeat in every century, you start to suspect they're more than accidents. You move past the camp's edge, where smoke rises from cooking fires. The smell of stew, too thin to be satisfying, mixes with the stench of sweat and fear. Women serve food to the same men who burned their homes. their hands trembling only slightly. Survival has a rhythm, and they've already learned the beat. A girl, maybe 16, asks a soldier if she can find her younger brother among the captives. He shrugs and says, if he's small, he's probably working the horses. She nods and thanks him, as though he'd given her kindness instead of indifference. Hope makes strange bargains. Later, as night falls again, you sit by a dying fire and listen to the whispers. Stories drift like smoke. A woman who pretended to be a healer to avoid rougher duties. Another who faked madness so they'd leave her alone. You realize these women are writing a new kind of warfare, one without swords, but just as brave. Somewhere nearby, someone starts singing softly. The melody is simple, old, maybe older than war itself. It's a lullaby about waiting for spring, for green fields, for men who never come home. The voice is cracked, but steady. Others join in, even the guards pause to listen. You think of how songs outlive swords. Maybe this is how memory resists, not with grand monuments, but with voices refusing to go quiet. You glance at the horizon again. Tomorrow, these same women will wake and face the same choices: obedience, deception, or defiance. They'll carry water, mend clothes, whisper prayers, and pretend not to hate the men who took everything. And yet, somehow, they'll endure. That's what people do, even when history forgets to thank them. As the fire dwindles to embers, you realize that survival itself has become its own rebellion. The women sit in silence, eyes reflecting the flicker of flames, not defeated, not yet free, but alive. And in this world, that's already a small kind of victory. Morning comes again, not with trumpets or cheers, but with the groan of cartwheels over mud. The victors are packing what they can steal: barrels of wine, bolts of cloth, and the last traces of the defeated. You follow the line of wagons, each one creaking under spoils. And then you notice, in some of them sit women, quiet, wrapped in cloaks that don't belong to them. This is where the word spoils stops sounding poetic. You watch as a soldier tosses a helmet into one cart and gestures toward a woman beside it. Same worth, he jokes. The men laugh, but not cruelly, just stupidly. The way people laugh when they need to convince themselves they're still human. You can feel the humiliation in the air, not loud, not visible, but heavy, like humidity before a storm. The women sit still, hands clenched, faces blank. They know that crying won't help, it only feeds the wolves. A captain shouts for order. The division of spoils begins. They gather in a clearing, around tables where scribes scratch names into parchment. The soldiers crowd in, half drunk, half proud. The rules are simple. First the gold, then the horses, then the living prizes. Your stomach turns. The women are listed by number, not by name. One blonde, two dark-haired, one noble-born. The clerk calls out as though reading from a menu. Each woman's fate sealed by a nod or a coin. A young knight hesitates. He doesn't want one. His friend nudges him. Don't be foolish, it's part of your reward. He takes a step back, mumbles something about honor. The others laugh. One says, "Honor doesn't warm you at night." You glance at the knight. His face burns with shame, not enough to stop the system, but enough to remember it. You hope he keeps that guilt. Maybe it will make him different later. Nearby, One of the older women looks around. Eyes dry. Jaw tight. She has lost her husband. Her sons. Her home. What more can they take? When a soldier reaches for her arm, she doesn't pull away, she just says, "Do what you came to do." Boy. The soldier freezes. No one calls him, boy, here. Her words strip the armor right off his pride. He walks away, muttering. She stands taller than before. That's the thing about power. Sometimes it collapses when you simply refuse to flinch. A scribe looks irritated. Next, he points to another woman, barely out of her teens. Her eyes dart between the men, calculating which one looks least cruel. It's not a choice. Really, just a gamble. You think about how history romanticizes knights and chivalry. All that talk of noble hearts and fair maidens. But this sorting ground, is what victory often looked like when the banners came down. Some historians, bless their academic optimism, still debate whether such practices were exaggerated. Others quietly admit, too many records, too many tales, too many ghosts repeating the same story for it to be a myth. The air grows colder. Somewhere, a priest murmurs a blessing over the dead. You almost laugh, not out of mockery, but disbelief. The same God invoked for mercy by both sides. Now watching while mercy itself is bartered away. You walk among the carts again. One woman meets your eyes. She doesn't speak, can't. Her lip is split, her hair matted, her dignity intact somehow. You nod, hoping she understands that someone, even centuries later, is looking back at her and remembering. There's a sudden commotion near the captain's tent. Two soldiers are fighting over a necklace, and the woman wearing it. Their shouts draw attention. The commander storms out. Enough, he roars. He orders the necklace taken for the treasury and the woman sent to the kitchens. Problem solved. Authority restored. The soldiers grumble. One spits on the ground. But you see the woman exhale. Quietly. The kitchens may be misery. But they're better than the alternative. Survival. Again. Wears strange disguises. A dog barks. A child cries. The camp continues to move like a slow, grinding machine of human greed. At noon, the captives who weren't claimed are marched toward the supply wagons. They'll serve as labor, cleaners, or offerings for foreign allies. You can't help but notice the way the guards avoid eye contact, as if acknowledging what they're doing would stain their souls too obviously. The road ahead is long. Some of the women whisper prayers. Others just stare at their own hands, as though memorizing them before everything else is stripped away. You catch a glimpse of the horizon, rolling hills, golden under the sun, beautiful, cruelly so. Nature never apologizes for its timing. One of the soldiers picks up a lute and begins to play an old folk song. Bright and cheerful, about harvest and love. The melody clashes with the scene so absurdly that it's almost tragic. You can't tell if the man is mocking them or comforting himself. A woman begins humming along. Softly. The others join. The guards shift uncomfortably. It's the same song sung by both sides before the battle. Now it belongs to neither. And in that fragile moment, the air feels different, not victorious, not defeated, just human again. You walk beside the caravan as it moves forward, creaking through mud and silence. You realize that this quiet, resigned procession, is how most wars actually end. not with the thunder of glory, but with the sound of wheels carrying away what's left of the living. A crow caws overhead. Someone mutters that it's a bad omen. You smile sadly. It's not an omen. Just the truth with wings. The wind picks up, and the banners flutter weakly. You pull your cloak tighter and keep walking, listening to the rhythm of chains and wooden wheels. This is history's heartbeat tonight, slow, uneven, heavy with memory. By the time the caravan reaches the fortress, the sun has turned a sickly gold, the kind that makes everything look both beautiful and diseased. The castle rises ahead, gray stone, damp with centuries of ambition. Its towers are thin and sharp, like fingers reaching up to clutch the sky. For the victors, it's homecoming. For the captured women, it's a cage carved out of prestige. The gates creak open, guards shout, horses snort, and the whole procession funnels inside like a living wound closing over itself. You step through, feeling the shift. Outside was war. Inside is something colder, administration. The noble captives are separated immediately. Titles, family crests, and dowry values are all the rage now. The scribe from earlier stands ready again, his ink as black as sin and twice as permanent. He calls out, Lady of House Montclair, Countess of Ryden, daughter of Sir Haldan. Each name is met with calculating stares. You can almost hear the arithmetic in the air. Who's worth ransoming? Who's worth keeping? Who's worth marrying off to an ally? The language of diplomacy smells suspiciously like the market you saw yesterday. One of the women steps forward. She's perhaps 30, maybe younger if not for the exhaustion etched around her eyes. I am Lady Elaine of Montclair, she says, voice steady. I demand to be treated according to my station. Her words hang in the air like a sword waiting to fall. The chamber falls silent. The commander, a broad man with eyes like a dull blade, studies her. Your station, he repeats, has lost the war. Then, surprisingly, he nods to a guard. Put her in a room. With food. And no harm. His tone makes it sound like generosity. The soldiers exchange looks. No one expected mercy. But mercy, when it appears here, isn't kindness, it's currency. Lady Elaine's family is rich. Her ransom will buy new armor, new wine, maybe new sins. You notice how quickly the mood changes around her. The guards treat her politely, not out of respect, but profit. When she walks past, one mutters, "Don't bruise the silver." Further down the hall, another woman steps forward. No title, no fine clothes, just a linen dress stained with earth. She says her name softly, but no one writes it down. Peasant, the scribe says flatly. Kitchen. You feel it again, that efficient cruelty. Like a machine made of hierarchy and habit. The nobles are stored for ransom, the poor are consumed on sight. Later that evening, as the hall fills with the smell of roasted meat and wine, you catch fragments of conversation. We treat them better than the barbarians do. One knight insists. Another laughs. Because we charge for them. The laughter rings hollow, but no one calls it out. You follow Lady Elaine's path through the corridors. She's given a room with a straw bed, a pitcher of water, and a single window barred like a confession booth. She doesn't weep. She stands by the window and stares out at the darkening sky. They think I'll break, she murmurs to herself. But I've seen worse in my father's council chambers. You believe her? In another wing of the castle, a very different kind of silence reigns. The servants' quarters are cramped, smoky, alive with whispers. The captured peasants have been thrown together here, cooks, maids, laundresses, and companions, for soldiers who think victory entitles them to comfort. You sit among them for a moment, watching. They share bread, patch clothes, exchange glances that say we're still here. One of them, an older woman with hair like ash, begins to hum a tune. It keeps the fear away. She explains. The melody is gentle, lilting, a lullaby that once soothed children, now cradles despair. A young girl joins in, her voice trembling at first, then steadying. The guards outside listen but say nothing. Maybe even they need the sound. As night deepens, you move through the castle's courtyards. Fires burn in iron baskets, casting shadows that dance like ghosts reenacting the battle. Somewhere, a nobleman laughs too loudly. Somewhere else, a woman whispers a prayer to a god she's not sure is still listening. You pass a storeroom where parchment is being sealed with wax. Ransom letters, each one a transaction disguised as a plea for mercy. You read the top of one. To His Grace, the Duke of Montclair, your daughter lives. For now. You wonder if the Duke will weep when he reads it, or just send the gold and go back to dinner. Outside, the moon rises, pale and sharp as polished bone. The fortress seems to hold its breath. The soldiers sleep, the captives do not. Every creak of a door, every distant footstep makes them flinch. You can almost feel the collective heartbeat pulsing beneath the stone, slow, steady, defiant. Some historians still debate how humanely noble captives were treated. Records praise knights for their gallantry, their codes of honor. But honor is a costume that looks different depending on who's wearing it and who's tied up on the floor. As you stand in the hallway, you hear Lady Elaine's voice faintly through the wall. She's speaking to herself, maybe to you. They can ransom my body, but not my mind. Her tone isn't despairing, it's dangerous. You realize then that the women here, the ones labeled, catalogued, and confined, are already rewriting the terms of their captivity. Quietly, patiently, the way roots crack through stone. Somewhere deep in the castle, a bell tolls midnight, the torches flicker. You imagine each flame as a small, stubborn heartbeat refusing to go out. And in that glow, you feel it, the first stirring of resistance. Faint but alive. The castle wakes before dawn. The halls echo with boots, buckets, and orders barked in too many languages. The war might be over, but its engine still runs, now fueled by obedience instead of blood. You follow the sound to the lower courtyard, where the new servants have been assembled. These are the peasant women, the ones too poor to ransom, too stubborn to die. They stand in a crooked line under the gray sky, shivering in wool cloaks that barely cover them. Their faces are hollow, their eyes alert, like deer that know the forest has teeth. A steward walks down the row, pointing, assigning. You, laundry. You, stables. You, kitchen. You, guest quarters. Each word is a verdict. Each task, a sentence. The steward doesn't shout, he doesn't need to. Authority in this place doesn't have to raise its voice, it just assumes the right to speak. The women nod, curtsy, or stay silent, depending on how much dignity they can afford to risk. You notice one of them, small, freckled, with hands that look too delicate for work. When the steward points at her and says, "Latrine duty," she smiles. It's the strangest, smallest act of rebellion, a smile that says, "You can assign me filth, but you'll never own the way I think about it." The other women glance at her. And for a moment, that flicker of courage travels down the line like a shared secret. Inside the kitchen, the air is thick with smoke and steam. Women scrub, chop, stir, carry, and endure. The men eat first. Of course, that's one of the unspoken commandments of medieval life, God first. Men second, women somewhere below the pigs. A cook, herself a prisoner from another war long ago, slaps a younger girl's hand away from the bread. "Don't eat while the masters are watching," she warns. The girl nods, eyes wide, stomach growling. Later, when no one's looking, the older woman breaks off a crust and slides it into the girl's palm. Compassion is contraband here, traded quietly and carefully. You walk among them, unseen. The smell of boiling broth and wood smoke clings to everything. The sound of knives on wood is rhythmic, hypnotic, like a prayer without words. Outside, the men train in the yard, swords clanging. Laughter rough and careless. The women pause to watch through the narrow kitchen window. Some look with hatred, some with longing, some with both. A young soldier notices. He grins and lifts his sword, showing off. One of the women, older, sharper, mutters, "If only your brain were as polished as that blade." The others stifle their laughter. The soldier frowns, unsure if he's been insulted or flirted with. That's the beauty of quiet defiance. It doesn't need to explain itself. Later, as dusk settles, the steward walks through the courtyard again, inspecting the day's labor. He passes a group of women washing clothes by the well. Their hands are red from cold water. Their knuckles raw. One of them hums, softly at first, then louder. The tune is familiar. A lullaby again. "Stop that," the steward snaps. "This is no place for singing." But she keeps humming, eyes lowered, pretending not to understand his language. The others join in. Their voices fill the courtyard, not joyfully, but firmly, as if reminding the world they're still here. The steward glares, mutters something about superstition, and walks away. The song grows softer, turns into a whisper, then fades. But the silence it leaves behind feels stronger than before. As night falls, the women gather in the servants' quarters. There's little space, just straw mats, old blankets, and the smell of damp stone. They share what's left of the evening meal, a bowl of thin stew and pieces of stale bread. One of them tells a story about a village before the war. About her sister's wedding, about dancing barefoot on summer grass. For a few minutes, the room warms with the memory of something gentle. Then someone asks, "Do you think the men we lost can see us?" No one answers. The fire pops. You can almost hear their thoughts, if they can. "I hope they're ashamed of dying first." Later, when the others sleep, one woman sits awake by the small window slit, staring at the stars. Her name is Elira. You recognize her from the line earlier, the one who smiled at her sentence. She whispers something into the darkness. "I'll last longer than they think." It's not a prayer, it's a promise. Somewhere, a bell tolls midnight. The castle exhales, the guards change shifts. Dogs bark. The wind slides through the cracks in the walls. Elira closes her eyes, still sitting upright, her body resting but her spirit awake. Historians rarely wrote about women like her. The chroniclers recorded kings, knights, taxes, treaties, not laundresses who hummed defiantly under moonlight. But history isn't made only by the powerful. It's sustained by the stubborn heartbeat of the powerless refusing to vanish. As you listen, the faint rhythm of that heartbeat fills the cold stone room. It sounds a little like hope, a little like survival, and maybe, just maybe, like revenge dreaming of its time. You lean back against the wall, letting that sound settle over you. The war outside may have ended. But inside these walls, a quieter battle has just begun, one fought with silence, endurance, and the smallest of smiles. The weeks drag on, and you start to feel time itself thicken. Like the air inside an old cathedral, heavy, unmoving, filled with unspoken prayers. The war outside is already being retold as legend. But here in the castle, the women who lost are still living it every day. They move through routines so precise it feels ritualistic: dawn fires, bread baking, washing, mending, serving. The sound of buckets clattering and knives scraping becomes the rhythm of captivity. But beneath that rhythm, there's something quieter: the hum of endurance, the sound of lives recalculating. You notice it most in the wives of the fallen warriors, the widows who used to walk proudly beside men in armor. Now they're ghosts wearing borrowed shawls. Some were noble once. Now they scrub floors next to the same peasants they used to command. War doesn't just destroy kingdoms, it levels social ladders. One widow, Lady Isolda, still wears her husband's ring. She cleans the soldiers' quarters in silence, the ring glinting under the torchlight. One of the guards laughs. "Still clinging to your ghost?" She doesn't reply. Later, when he leaves, she spits in his wine cup. Not much of a rebellion, but it tastes like one. You follow her that night to the chapel. She kneels before a wooden cross, her face half lit by candlelight. If he's in heaven, she whispers, "Tell him I'm still fighting." She crosses herself, but it looks less like a prayer and more like drawing a sword. Across the courtyard, another widow, younger, maybe 20, has no ring, no chapel, no faith left. Her name is Elena. The steward tells her she must remarry, as the land her husband once held now belongs to the victor's cousin. A practical arrangement, he calls it. You can almost hear the ink drying on her fate. Elena looks up and says softly, "I'd rather marry the wind." The steward frowns. "The wind doesn't pay taxes." She smiles. "Neither will I." Of course, she doesn't get a choice. The marriage is quick, bureaucratic, a handshake between men who never even look at her face. The ceremony takes place in the castle yard. A priest mutters blessings that sound like excuses, and someone ties a faded ribbon around her wrist. She stands perfectly still, her expression unreadable. That night, the new husband drinks himself into a stupor. Elena takes his cloak, walks to the stables, and sleeps beside the horses. Their breath is warmer than his. You watch her eyes open at dawn. She doesn't cry. She doesn't pray. She just whispers to the horse, "At least you don't lie." And you realize, women like her don't break, they dissolve and reshape. Like ice turning to water, finding new cracks to flow through. In the village outside the castle walls, More widows arrive every week. Women walking from burned farms, carrying whatever the flames didn't take. Some are barefoot, others pregnant, all silent. The guards call them beggars. The priests call them fallen. The truth is simpler: they're survivors. And no one likes being reminded that survival isn't pretty. A few find work mending clothes or tending the soldiers' children. Others vanish into the forests, where rumor says they form small bands, trading food, helping fugitives, and haunting the roads like living ghosts. The victors call them witches. The women call themselves sisters. Some historians insist these stories were exaggerated, that noble mercy prevailed, that widows were protected. But records of protection often read like contracts with invisible chains. You can almost hear the quills scratching over the screams they chose not to describe. Back in the castle, Lady Isolde begins teaching other widows how to write, on scraps of parchment stolen from the scribe's desk. They practice at night, whispering letters as though they were spells. A, B, C. The sound is soft, rhythmic, sacred. One evening, she says, "Words are sharper than swords if you live long enough to use them." You smile in the dark. Somewhere centuries ahead, women will sign their own names, write their own histories, tell their own stories, and it will begin here, in stolen ink and whispered lessons. Meanwhile, Elena plans. She hides food under the hayloft, gathers bits of rope, waits for the right moon. Her plan isn't for escape, it's for leaving with purpose. She wants to find the other widows in the woods, to join those witches. She doesn't believe in magic, but she believes in anger that refuses to die. The night she leaves, no one hears her. She slips past the guards, barefoot and silent. The forest swallows her whole. You watch her vanish between the trees like smoke. The next morning, the steward discovers her gone and shrugs. "She'll freeze out there," he says. "Better the cold than a cell." He doesn't know that the cold can be a teacher too. Lady Isolde hears the news and smiles faintly. "Good," she murmurs. "The forest needs new stories." That night, she adds a new letter to their secret lessons, F for freedom. The firelight flickers over their faces, over the ink stains on their fingers, over the tiny rebellion burning quietly in the heart of the defeated. Outside, the wind carries a faint echo. Maybe it's Elena's voice. Maybe just the forest breathing. Either way, it sounds like a promise. The war may have ended, but history hasn't heard the last of them yet. The forest breathes differently at night, damp and ancient, filled with the restless sighs of things that survived too long. You follow the wind through the black trees until you see a flicker of fire between the branches. Not a camp of soldiers this time. Something quieter, smaller, human. Elena has found them. A handful of women huddle around a low fire built in a hollow between rocks. No banners, no crosses, no commanders, just faces lit by orange light, streaked with soot and defiance. They don't ask her name. They just pass her a bowl of stew and make room by the fire. "Welcome, sister," one says. It's not a word of faith, it's a word of survival. These are the forgotten ones, widows, runaways, healers, women accused of witchcraft for knowing too much or speaking too loud. They call themselves the women of two flags, because they belonged to both sides once, and neither wants them now. They speak in murmurs, Stories from ruined villages. Of children hidden during raids. Of friends lost to hunger or worse. Each voice blends into the next, like threads woven through the same torn fabric. One woman, older than the rest, has a scar across her cheek and a laugh that sounds like it was stolen from a storm. Her name is Mira. She tells Elena, "We heal who we can, feed who we find, and we make sure they remember us, the men, the priests, the kings. We whisper our names into their dreams." Elena studies her face, the way the firelight dances across her eyes. "And does it work?" she asks. Mira shrugs. "Sometimes they wake screaming. That's enough. You can't help but smile. There's something fiercely poetic in their quiet vengeance, not of blades, but of endurance." As the night deepens, a small boy stirs in the corner of the camp. He's no older than 5, clutching a wooden soldier missing one arm. Elena notices him. "Who's he?" she asks. "His father wore the wrong colors," Mira says softly. "So did his mother. Both gone now. He's ours." The boy opens one sleepy eye, looks at Elena, and mumbles, "Are you a witch too?" She hesitates. Then she smiles. "Only when I need to be." The women laugh, quietly. But it sounds like the first good laugh in months. They aren't witches, of course. Not really. But words like witch and widow carry the same curse in this century. A woman who won't obey. When dawn breaks, fog rolls through the trees like spilled milk. The camp disappears into it. Perfectly practiced. They know every bird call, every hiding place, every path that leads away from danger. For them, safety isn't a destination, it's motion. Elena helps gather herbs and wood. Her hands are numb, her breath white in the cold. But for the first time in months, she feels alive. When she looks at the firelight reflecting in the eyes of these women, she sees something she hasn't felt since the war began: purpose. They don't talk about revenge often, only about balance. Men take, we mend, Mira says, crushing leaves between her fingers. Not because we forgive them, but because someone has to fix what's broken. Later, a traveler stumbles into their clearing, a deserter. Gaunt and desperate. The women don't kill him. They feed him, patch his wounds, then send him away with a warning. Tell your commanders the forest isn't empty. He nods, trembling. What should I tell them lives here? Mira smiles, slow and sharp. Ghosts of their own making. The man runs. The women laugh again. Some historians still debate whether groups like this actually existed. Bands of women surviving together in the woods. Outlaws but not criminals. Rebels but not soldiers. The records are scarce. But then again, men wrote the records. One winter night, as snow begins to fall, Elena sits by the fire with Mira and asks, "Do you ever miss your old life?" Mira stares into the flames. "No," she says, "but sometimes I miss being naive enough to believe I had one." Her words hang in the cold air, the kind that freezes truth into permanence. Outside, the forest hums, an orchestra of branches creaking, wolves howling, and something deeper, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The women fall silent, listening. Elena closes her eyes. She dreams of her husband, not as a ghost, but as a shadow fading behind her. In the dream, she isn't following him anymore. He's the one who can't keep up. She wakes with frost on her lashes and the faint sound of singing. Someone's humming an old cradle song, the kind mothers used before the war. The boy with the wooden soldier lies curled up beside her. His toy arm is fixed now, crudely, but lovingly. She smiles. "You fixed it," she whispers. He nods. Mira said broken things should never stay that way. Elena looks toward the fire. Myra's already awake, staring into the snowstorm, her silhouette steady as a statue. You realize something then. These women, hidden in the woods, are no longer refugees. They've become a memory that refuses to fade. A rumor that travels faster than soldiers, scarier than swords. And one day, when the king's scribes write their histories, they'll leave this part out. But in taverns and lullabies, people will whisper of the women of two flags, and the men who feared to enter their forest. Because fear, after all, is its own kind of legacy. Snow has a way of silencing the world. It buries not only footprints but also guilt. By the time spring creeps back into the land, the stories of those forest women have already begun to twist. In nearby towns, priests stand in pulpits warning of temptresses and demons who lure righteous men astray. You stand in the back of one of these churches. The incense so thick it feels like a disguise. The priest's voice booms through the hall. They are the daughters of sin. They whisper in the ears of our sons. They must be purged so that God may restore purity to this land. The congregation murmurs its approval. A few women in the crowd lower their heads, hands clasped tight, as though prayer could protect them from being mistaken for the very witches the priest describes. You can feel the fear crawling through the air like smoke through a keyhole. When the sermon ends, people scatter like leaves, whispering. A merchant leans toward another man. "My cousin saw one near the forest last month," he says. "She blessed his wound, and it healed." The other man frowns. "Then why call her a witch?" "Because," the merchant answers, "no man should heal from a woman's touch unless he's married to her." You can almost hear medieval logic sighing under its own absurd weight. Later, the priest writes to the bishop, demanding soldiers to cleanse the region. The letter drips with piety. But the subtext is power. The church doesn't like when miracles happen without its permission. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Elena and the others feel the change in the air before word even reaches them. Ravens circle lower. Strangers linger longer at the edge of the woods. The wind carries the faint sound of men sharpening blades. Mira sits by the fire, grinding herbs into paste. "They're coming," she says simply. "They always do, when women start helping each other." That night, they move deeper into the forest, taking the boy, the fire, and their secrets with them. The snow crunches softly underfoot, the moon slicing through branches like a blade of bone. They travel silently, guided by instinct and the memory of roads that no longer exist. Days later, soldiers arrive at the edge of the forest. You can see them from a hill, armored, confident, torches in hand. They march in rows, muttering prayers and threats in equal measure. "We'll burn out the witches by dawn," their captain declares. He doesn't notice how the forest watches back. The soldiers find nothing at first, just trees, mist, and the unsettling feeling of being unwelcome. One of them jokes nervously, "Maybe the witches turned into crows." Another laughs, "Too loud." to drown out the fear. By nightfall, they make camp near a frozen stream. They eat, drink, and talk about how foolish people are to fear women with herbs and songs. Then they start hearing things, faint voices, laughter, a lullaby drifting between the trees. The captain orders silence. It's the wind, he says, but the wind doesn't know lullabies. At dawn, one of the men is gone. Only his boots remain by the fire. The rest leave before the sun fully rises. They tell no one what they saw, or didn't see. By the time they return to the village, they've already convinced themselves it was just superstition. Back in the forest, Elena watches the empty clearing from behind the trees. Her hands are shaking, not from fear, but from fury. They'll keep sending more, she says. Mira nods. Then we'll keep vanishing. You follow them as they reach a small clearing filled with ruins, stones covered in moss. Remnants of an old chapel long forgotten. They set up camp there. Mira looks at the broken altar and says, "We'll make this our sanctuary. Not for God, for each other." And they do. They hang herbs from the rafters, clean the floor, carve symbols into the stone, not spells, but names, names of the dead, the missing, the forgotten, so they can find their way back to us. Mira explains. At night, they light candles along the walls. The place glows softly, like a heartbeat made visible. You can almost believe the forest itself exhales in relief. Some historians claim these sanctuaries existed, secret refuges run by women for women, hidden under the guise of superstition. Others dismiss them as folklore, bedtime stories told to keep men out of the woods. But every legend starts somewhere, and this one feels too real to be fiction. In the months that follow, women from nearby villages begin to disappear. Some say they were kidnapped. Others say they left willingly. The truth, of course, depends on who you ask. One evening, a woman arrives at the sanctuary carrying a baby swaddled in rough linen. She doesn't speak, she just kneels, places the child in Myra's arms, and whispers, "Raise him to be kind." Then she vanishes into the night. The baby's name is Tomas. He grows quickly, surrounded by laughter, stories, and the gentle strength of women who teach him to heal before he ever learns to fight. Years later, he will become a physician, one of the few men in history to write that knowledge learned from women is not witchcraft, but wisdom. His name will be nearly erased from the records, but his words will survive in the margins of an old book, scribbled in faded ink. And maybe that's enough. Because, as Mira often says while stirring her pot of herbs, history doesn't need to remember us, as long as it remembers what we taught. Outside, the wind picks up again. You hear faint chanting, not a curse, not a prayer, but something older, a promise that whispers through time. We will not vanish quietly. Autumn slides into the forest quietly, brushing the leaves with copper and ash. The air tastes of wood smoke and damp earth. You can feel the season changing not just in the trees, but in the tone of the women's laughter. It's softer now, tinged with something like nostalgia. It's been 2 years since the king's decree. The sanctuary thrives. The women move openly through nearby villages, selling remedies, tending wounds, teaching others what once had to be whispered. For the first time in memory, their work is not a secret. But peace is a fragile guest. It always leaves too early. You see it first in the new faces at the gates. Men in plain robes, claiming to be scholars of the church. They speak politely, ask harmless questions, and write down far too much. We've heard of your successes. One of them says to Celine, who now teaches the younger girls. The kingdom must ensure all knowledge serves God, not vanity. Celine smiles sweetly. And who decides which is which? The man smiles back, the kind of smile that promises trouble later. We do, of course. Mira watches from the shadows. Expression unreadable. The wind's shifting again, she murmurs. Within weeks, new rumors spread through the towns. That the healers used charms and chants to bind souls. That the forest itself bends to their will. No one can prove it, but proof has never been the point. By the first frost, another messenger arrives, this one not so polite. He carries a sealed letter bearing both royal and ecclesiastical seals. Mira reads it aloud to the gathered women, her voice calm but heavy. By joint decree of crown and church, she begins, all healers must register their names and practices under clerical supervision. Unauthorized treatment of illness or injury will be considered an act of heresy. A ripple of murmurs runs through the group. You can feel the old fear returning, slithering back into the cracks it once called home. Claire clenches her fists. So we're back to chains with paperwork attached. Elena nods grimly. They never meant to share power, just borrow it. Mira folds the letters slowly and tosses it into the fire. Then let them come. They can register ashes if they wish. That night, the sanctuary holds a meeting, the kind that history never records because it happens in whispers. Not proclamations. The women sit in a circle, the firelight flickering across their faces. Mira speaks first. We can't fight them with swords. We'll fight them with memory. Celine adds, we'll scatter our work, one copy here, one there, recipes, cures, knowledge, hide them where no priest would look. In songs, in kitchens, in children's rhymes. The plan is simple, brilliant, and dangerous. Each woman will carry part of the knowledge elsewhere, turning their craft into folklore so that even if the sanctuary burns again, the wisdom will live disguised as superstition. A charm against fever becomes a lullaby. A cure for childbirth pain becomes a prayer. A lesson in anatomy becomes a tale about angels. You realize they're building a secret library not on shelves, but in minds. Before dawn, the first group departs, Celine among them. She hugs Mira tightly. You'll see me again. Mira shakes her head. No, but others will say your name. And that's close enough. When the sun rises, the forest looks unchanged, but you can feel its pulse scatter, like embers carried on the wind. Weeks pass. Then the church returns in force, priests, soldiers, bureaucrats, and arrogance in equal measure. They find the sanctuary nearly empty. Only Mira remains, sitting by the fire as though expecting them. The priest in charge, a lean man with sharp eyes, steps forward. By authority of the crown and the Holy See, you are to surrender your records and swear obedience to the faith. Mira looks up slowly. You'll have to kneel to pick them up. They're under the floorboards. He frowns. Then you admit to heretical practice. I admit to healing people. The heresies in your imagination. The soldiers search the building, overturning tables, ripping through bundles of herbs. scattering ashes and parchment. They find nothing that makes sense, just fragments, children's songs, cooking notes, prayers for rain. One soldier asks, confused, "What are we even looking for?" The priest glares. "Control." You can't help but smile sadly. He'll never find it here. They arrest Mira anyway. She doesn't resist. When they bind her hands, she says, "You can tie my wrists, but not the roots." They drag her from the forest, leaving the sanctuary in ruins once more. But when night falls, the place still breathes. The carved altar remains, the names still etched into stone. Far away, Celine hears the news and writes one final entry in her secret book. They took Mira, but not the knowledge. We have hidden it in 1,000 tongues, 1,000 homes. It will bloom in places they'll never imagine, between lullabies, behind laughter, beneath the skin of stories. And when they call us witches again, we will smile, because we will remember. Centuries later, a scholar will find that line in an old nursery rhyme and wonder why it sounds so much like prophecy. You, though, already know. The forest women are gone from sight, but not from the world. Their words, their craft, their courage have already escaped into the bloodstream of history. And the world, though it won't admit it, will never be the same again. Winter returns like a slow punishment. The wind cuts through empty branches, whistling through the ruins of the sanctuary where once laughter lived. The stones are cold now, streaked with soot, but if you listen closely, you can still hear something, a hum. Faint but steady. Memory doesn't die, it just changes temperature. Mira is gone. The soldiers took her south, toward the capital, to face judgment, but in truth, it's the world that's on trial, not her. You follow the caravan from a distance, through villages that whisper her name in fear and reverence. The witch of the greenwood, the healer who defied the crown, the old woman who cured children and cursed kings. By the time she arrives, the entire city is talking. The church sees an opportunity. The crowd gathers for spectacle. Because nothing brings people together like the promise of someone else's suffering. The trial takes place in a great stone hall lined with banners. The bishop presides, flanked by priests with ink-stained fingers and soldiers with restless eyes. Mira stands barefoot on the cold floor, wrists chained but spine straight. They call her many things: heretic, witch, corrupter, idolater. She corrects none of them. When asked if she understands the charges, she replies simply, "No, but I understand fear." The bishop frowns. "Then you admit guilt. Only of living long enough to scare you." A murmur ripples through the audience. You can almost hear the sound of history holding its breath. They bring witnesses, farmers, priests, even a few women who once came to her for help. Most refused to speak against her. One man stammers that his wife was healed of fever after Mira's herbs. But she made her pray to the moon first. The bishop seizes on it. Pagan ritual. Mira smiles faintly. She prayed to what she could see. I think God prefers honesty to flattery. Laughter breaks out before the guards silence it. The bishop's face darkens. Enough. Confess, and the church may spare your life. Spare it for what? She asks. You've already used it to build your power. The silence that follows is sharper than any sword. You can see even the soldiers hesitate. as if suddenly aware they are part of something cruel. Finally, the verdict: guilty of heresy. Sentenced to death at dawn. Predictable. But as the crowd disperses, people avoid looking at her. Some bow their heads. Others make the sign of the cross, not against her, but for her. That night, in her cell, Mira sits alone, humming softly. The guard, barely more than a boy, asks why she isn't afraid. Because, she says, you can't burn what already turned to flame. He doesn't understand, but he gives her a candle anyway. Outside, snow begins to fall. At dawn, they lead her to the square. The sky is pale, the kind of cold that feels personal. The crowd gathers again, drawn by curiosity and guilt. The pyre stands ready, dry wood stacked high. The bishop steps forward, reading the final rites. Do you repent of your sins? Mira looks out over the crowd, farmers, mothers, soldiers, children. Her gaze settles not on the priests, but on a young girl near the front, clutching her mother's hand. The girl's eyes are wide, bright, familiar. Mira smiles. I repent nothing but silence. They light the fire. Flames climb quickly, hungry for theater, but instead of screams, the square fills with song. Soft at first, then rising, a lullaby. The same melody that's haunted the forest for generations. The girl starts it, her voice trembling, joined by others, until even the guards look unsure. It's the song of the women of two flags. The song of healers and widows and mothers who refused to vanish. You stand among them, the heat from the fire warming your face. And for a moment, it feels like the entire city is burning, not in destruction, but awakening. When the flames finally die, there's nothing left but ash and the faint scent of rosemary. Someone steps forward, quietly scooping a handful of the gray dust into a cloth pouch. The crowd disperses without cheering. No one feels triumphant. Weeks later, in villages far and wide, rumors begin again. A woman healed of fever with a paste of herbs and honey. Another helped of birth by whispering to the moon. A child cured of plague swears he saw an old woman standing in the doorway, smiling, smelling of smoke and thyme. The church sends investigators, of course. They find no witches, only mothers, wives, healers. Each denies knowing anything, but every town they visit hums the same lullaby at dusk. Some historians will later say that Myra's death marked the end of an age. They'll call it the burning of the last witch. Others will say it was the beginning of something larger, an idea spreading quietly through generations. Too subtle to ban, too human to kill. You know which version is true. Because centuries later, the same lullaby will appear in a medieval manuscript labeled anonymous. Doctors will hum it absent-mindedly while stitching wounds. Midwives will murmur its rhythm to calm their patients. Mothers will sing it to children who never learn where it came from. And somewhere in that echo, soft, persistent, eternal, Mira still breathes. Years turn into centuries, empires collapse, languages mutate, and the world forgets the names of kings who once demanded prayers before battle. But somehow, the women's names, Elaine, Isolda, Elena, Mira, linger like dust caught in sunlight. You can't quite see them, but they're always there when you breathe. The age of faith fades into the age of reason. And yet, Reason inherits the ghosts of its past. The universities rise, built on stone once blessed by priests. Men in long coats lecture about science and medicine, claiming they've discovered new cures, fever remedies, pain bombs, childbirth herbs. You recognize them all. They're the forest women's recipes, stripped of song and renamed for scholars. One physician proudly declares he's invented a tonic for lung sickness. You almost laugh. It's Myra's blend of thyme, honey, and water boiled under moonlight. Only now it's called elixir mirabilis and sold for gold instead of gratitude. But knowledge doesn't care about its passport. It travels freely, surviving even arrogance. In a small town near the northern coast, a midwife named Eleonora keeps a box of old notes passed down from her grandmother. She can't read them, but she knows what they mean. The green leaf for fever, the blue flower for sleep. She hums while mixing her brews, always the same tune. When asked where she learned it, she shrugs. It was always there. That song is the thread that binds centuries together. You follow Eleonora one winter night as she's called to a manor where a noblewoman struggles through childbirth. The doctor is late, of course, delayed by snow and pride. The servants panic. The husband prays. The fire burns low. Eleonora kneels beside the woman, whispers the lullaby, and works. Her hands move like her ancestors, steady, practical, unafraid. When the child finally cries, the mother weeps. The husband declares it a miracle. Eleonora says nothing. She just hums the tune again. A few weeks later, the local priest visits her cottage. He's polite, almost kind, but his eyes are sharp. You should be careful, he warns. People still whisper about witchcraft. Eleonora smiles faintly. They've been whispering for 1,000 years. Perhaps it comforts them. He leaves unsettled. You can feel the rhythm repeating, the same dance between gratitude and suspicion. Progress and fear. Every generation replays it with different costumes. In the capital, philosophers write essays on reason and enlightenment. The Dark Ages are over, one declares. But outside their candlelit rooms, women still whisper cures, still risk accusations for knowing too much. Eileen, a young student secretly attending medical lectures disguised as a man, copies notes by candlelight. She hides her long hair beneath a cap and her name beneath a pseudonym. On one page, she writes a phrase in Latin, memoria non moritur. She doesn't know where she heard it, only that it feels like truth. Later, when her professors praise her innovation in antiseptic herbs, she stays silent. Let them think it's new. The knowledge was never about credit, it was about continuity. In taverns, travelers still tell stories of a forest deep in the old country, a place where strange lights flicker and women's voices sing in the wind. No one who goes there sick ever stays sick, they say, but you must leave something behind, or the forest keeps you. You smile. The myth has grown teeth. Every tale adds another layer, disguising truth as superstition so it can survive the zeal of progress. Centuries roll onward. The world changes clothes again, silk to soot, candlelight to gaslight, horses to engines. Doctors now carry stethoscopes instead of herbs. But the songs remain. Nurses hum them unconsciously in hospital wards. Mothers murmur them in languages long divorced from Latin. And somewhere, a child still asks, Who taught you that song? The mother shrugs. My grandmother did. And that's the point. The forest women have woven themselves into bloodlines, into culture, into the invisible architecture of care. They don't need statues or books. Their memory lives in motion, in gestures, in instincts, in kindness repeated so often it no longer remembers its source. Historians, centuries later, will stumble upon fragments, letters, marginal notes, strange phrases in old recipes, and try to piece together who they were. They'll call it the Greenwood Network, the Sisterhood of the Hidden Flame, the Healer's Line. Each theory will get something right and something wrong, because truth resists neat endings. But you know the truth. It was never a network. It was survival written in the language of compassion. And somewhere, deep in an archive no one visits, a scholar finds a parchment blackened with age. 3 Latin words scratched faintly at the bottom. Memoria non moritur. Memory does not die. She traces the letters, unaware that she's part of the story now. Outside her window, the wind rustles through trees that were once part of the greenwood. The sound is soft, almost like singing. The 20th century arrives like thunder, steel, smoke, and engines roaring louder than any prayer. The world calls itself modern now. But if Mira could see it, she'd probably smile and say, "New toys, same ghosts." You drift through the changing age, through cities trembling with electricity, through hospital corridors where machines beep like heartbeats trapped in cages. The world has learned to measure life in data, not faith, and yet, somehow, the same lullabies hum beneath the sterile noise. In a cramped London ward during the Great War, a nurse named Margaret bends over a wounded soldier. His breath rattles like paper. She presses a cloth to his chest and whispers, "Breathe with me." The melody is faint, familiar, the same rhythm Mira once hummed by firelight. The soldier, delirious, murmurs, "That song. My mother used to sing it." Margaret just smiles. Then she must have learned it from a good teacher. Outside, artillery rumbles. Inside, she keeps humming. Healing doesn't need silence, it needs rhythm. The war ends, then begins again, because humanity loves to relearn pain. But each time, amid the ruins, the same figures appear: nurses, doctors, midwives, volunteers, mostly women, anonymous and unstoppable. You can trace the line back through them like veins through history. In France, a medic scribbles notes in a field diary. Chamomile tea reduces shock. Honey water calms breathing. Proven by experience. He signs only with his initials. But next to the entry, he sketches a leaf with 3 small berries, the same herbal mark the forest women used centuries ago. Coincidence? Perhaps. But history doesn't really do coincidences. Does it? Meanwhile, across the ocean, industrialization swallows the forests. The greenwood turns to factories. Its songs drowned by machinery. Yet in small corners, kitchens, hospital basements, refugee camps, the same knowledge blooms like moss in cracks. You walk through one such place, a bomb shelter in Berlin, 1943. The air stinks of dust and fear. A woman tends to children, pressing cloths soaked in herbs against their wounds. "Where did you find those?" a soldier asks. "My grandmother's garden," she replies. "She said they keep away sickness." He laughs bitterly. Superstitions. She glances up, her eyes bright with exhaustion. Maybe, but they work. And that's how wisdom survives, by refusing to care whether it's fashionable. After the war, the world discovers antibiotics, vaccines, X-rays, miracles with Latin names and corporate patents. The men who invent them are praised as saviors. But in the footnotes of one research paper, you find something curious. Original remedy inspired by folk healing practices recorded in rural Europe. No further details given. Of course not. You follow time again, stepping into the late 1960s. The world buzzes with protest, with women demanding what history always owed them: names, voices, ownership of their work. A young doctor, Elena Kovacs, gives a lecture in Budapest on the forgotten lineage of healing arts. She speaks of unrecognized midwives, anonymous herbalists, women whose wisdom shaped modern medicine. The audience shifts uneasily. A man interrupts. "You speak as if superstition built science." She smiles calmly. "No, I speak as if compassion did." In that moment, she becomes a modern descendant of Mira, unburned, unafraid. Later, she publishes a paper titled Memoria non moritur, Healing as Cultural Inheritance. It's dismissed by her peers as poetic but unscientific. But the article circulates quietly, photocopied, passed between nurses, students, and women who feel the echo of something older in their bones. One night, Elena visits her grandmother's cottage by the river. The old woman sits knitting by candlelight, humming a tune Elena doesn't remember learning but somehow knows by heart. "You know that song?" her grandmother asks. Elena nods. "I've always known it." The old woman smiles. "Then you're one of them." "Who?" Elena asks. "The ones who remember." Outside, the wind stirs through the reeds, whispering like a chorus of forgotten names. You realize the song has traveled farther than the forest ever reached, carried by mouths, hearts, and hands. It's been disguised as lullaby, prayer, and sometimes protest, but the melody never changed. By the late 20th century, humanity congratulates itself on progress. The age of superstition, they say, is over, yet hospitals still hum with the old rhythm. Mothers still sing the old words. And every act of care, every hand that soothes a brow, every whisper of "you'll be all right," carries the same defiance that began long ago with women who refused to vanish. You can feel it even now, beneath the hum of fluorescent lights. Beneath the whine of machines, that heartbeat of resistance, steady and quiet as breath. If you listen closely, the song is still there, not in Latin or in prayer, but in the pulse of kindness itself. And somewhere, perhaps in the memory of your own body, Myra's voice lingers, not as legend, not as ghost, but as inheritance. By the dawn of the 21st century, the forest is gone. What remains of it exists only in fragments, museum dioramas, botanical gardens, digital recreations viewed through glass screens. Cities now stand where moss once ruled, their skylines glowing like constellations turned upside down. Humanity, proud and sleepless, calls this progress. And yet, if you listen closely beneath the electric hum, you can still hear her. That low, unbroken rhythm, the lullaby that survived the flames. You walk through a hospital at 2 a.m. the hour when even machines sound tired. The nurses move quietly between rooms, adjusting blankets, checking pulses, whispering soft encouragements. One hums a tune without realizing it. Another joins in. The melody drifts through the corridor like a ghost wearing scrubs. No one knows where it came from, but it feels ancient, familiar in a way that science can't quite chart. You pause by a door where a child sleeps, tubes curling from her small hands. Her mother sits beside her, humming the same melody, voice trembling with love and exhaustion. A nurse hears it, smiles faintly, and says, "My grandmother sang that to me." The woman nods. "Mine too." There it is again, the inheritance. Quietly skipping generations of violence to land softly in the present. Outside, the world spins faster than ever, satellites orbit. Data streams pulse. People stare into glowing rectangles looking for meaning. But even now, people still reach for the same gestures. A cool hand on a fevered forehead. A whispered promise of safety. A breath shared between panic and calm. The language of healing hasn't changed. Only its backdrop has. In a research lab in Geneva, a geneticist studies a sample of ancient pollen found preserved in a cathedral wall. When she analyzes it, she's stunned. The plant is identical to one used in medieval herbal medicine. Thought extinct for centuries. Impossible, she murmurs. But somehow it isn't. The seed survived, dormant and patient. When she publishes the finding, she titles the paper "Resilience of Forgotten Flora." The footnote reads, "Dedicated to the anonymous healers who first found its use." You smile, because even the lab coats are whispering now. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Prague, a young woman records herself singing an old tune for a social media challenge. She calls it, "The Witch's Lullaby." The video goes viral. Millions listen. Some say it soothes anxiety. Others remix it into meditation tracks. No one realizes they're humming a 900-year-old rebellion. Comments flood in. "Where's this from? Sounds like home. Can't stop playing it before bed." You know exactly where it's from. The melody travels again, across oceans. Through earbuds. Through data streams, slipping quietly into minds that will never know its origin. Myra's forest has become wireless. Her fire digital. But the essence remains. To comfort. To connect. To remind people they're still human in a world that sometimes forgets. Somewhere, in a classroom, a history professor lectures about medieval witch hunts, while his students scroll silently. One girl in the back hums under her breath, the same tune. The professor pauses, frowns. "What song is that?" She shrugs. "I don't know. It just helps me focus." The class laughs, but you catch the small smile she hides. That's how it spreads, through moments too ordinary for textbooks to notice. Years pass again. The world changes names, currencies, climates, but wherever people care for each other, the rhythm returns. In refugee tents, in war zones, in quiet homes where grief lingers, the same melody rises. Patient and unbroken. Some scientists begin to study it. They record the tune, trace its variations across cultures, and publish a paper, The Global Lullaby Phenomenon. They conclude that humans instinctively create similar melodic patterns for comfort. None of them realize they're studying a single song that has outlived nations. In one of the appendices, an intern notes something peculiar. In several languages, the phrase for soothing song translates roughly to forest whisper. You can almost hear Mira laughing from the soil. The old oath still holds, memoria non moritur. Memory does not die. It simply changes form, ink to voice, voice to hum, hum to frequency. And as you stand there, amid the glowing screens and sterile air, you realize the women of the past aren't gone. They've become the invisible architecture of empathy itself, the instinct that makes strangers hold a door, the soft tone that calms a frightened patient, the impulse to reach out when someone trembles. The forest is everywhere now. It's in the breath before a lullaby, the pause before forgiveness, the heartbeat that steadies someone else's. Myra's ashes scattered centuries ago, but her rhythm pulses through every hand that heals and every voice that soothes. Listen long enough, and you'll hear it too, under the static of modern life, that quiet, ancient promise still alive in the background hum. You are not forgotten. You wake one evening to the sound of rain, soft, steady, ancient. It taps against windows like fingers knocking on the glass of time itself. The city hums beneath you, neon veins glowing, but the rain makes everything slow again, as if reminding the world how to breathe. Outside, people hurry with umbrellas, hunched against the storm. Inside, in a small apartment high above the noise, a young woman sits by her desk, headphones in, typing late into the night. She's a historian, though not the kind who deals with kings and treaties. Her name is Anais, and she studies unwritten memory, the ways stories survive without ever being written down. She's spent years chasing whispers, lullabies with no known authors, remedies that appear in multiple cultures centuries apart, sketches in margins of manuscripts signed only with symbols, a crescent moon, 3 berries, a sprig of rosemary. Every trail ends in mystery. But tonight, she's found something new. A forgotten archive from an abbey in Provence has been digitized. The records are mostly mundane, inventories of wine, repairs to roofs, but in one folder, she finds a page that stops her breath. It's a hymn, written in delicate Gothic script, but the melody, marked in faded notation, looks oddly familiar. She hums it softly, then freezes. It's the same as the forest whisper melody used in the viral lullaby she heard as a child. She scrolls down. Beneath the notes, someone has scribbled a Latin phrase in a different hand. Memoria non moritur. Her fingers tremble over the keyboard. It's not proof, not in the academic sense, but it feels like contact. Like shaking hands across centuries. She opens her journal and writes. The melody appears in multiple contexts: lullaby, chant, field song, even protest hymn. It crosses geography, class, religion. Perhaps it wasn't written for survival. Perhaps it was written by it. Outside, thunder rumbles softly. She closes her laptop and walks to the window. The reflection stares back, her own face lit by the ghostly blue of the screen. And behind her, the rain streaking down like melted centuries. She whispers, "Who were you?" The room feels heavier, warmer. For a heartbeat, she swears she hears another voice whisper back, faint, amused, familiar. You already know. She turns, but the room is empty. Only the hum of her computer. The hiss of rain. Still, something has shifted. She feels it in her chest, that small pulse. That rhythm. She starts humming again without thinking. Later, when she uploads her findings, the file is titled simply The Greenwood Hypothesis. She writes in her closing notes, "If knowledge is passed not through books but through care, then perhaps the true archive of civilization lives not in libraries, but in people." The paper gains little attention at first. Too poetic, some say, not rigorous enough, but slowly, quietly, it begins to spread. Nurses read it, teachers quote it, musicians adapt it, someone turns the title into a song. And so it begins again, the same story told through new mouths. Wearing new clothes. You travel through the world with it now. Watching the melody evolve, it becomes part of meditation apps, movie soundtracks, even children's toys that play ancient soothing harmonies. No one remembers where it started, but everyone feels it. In refugee camps, aid workers use the melody to calm frightened children. In hospitals, therapists play it for trauma patients. In one recorded session, a woman recovering from war trauma begins to hum along unconsciously. When asked if she knows the song, she says, "No, but I think my soul does." Somewhere, Anais watches this footage and weeps quietly. She knows the lineage by heart now: Mira, Elena, Isolde, Claire, Celine, names half dissolved by time but alive in gesture, in song, in the way people choose tenderness over cruelty. One evening, she travels to the last fragment of the old Greenwood, preserved as a nature reserve. It's small, barely a few acres of moss and oak, but as she steps under the canopy, the air feels charged. Rain drips through the leaves, steady as breath. She sits at the base of an ancient tree and begins to hum. The sound blends with the rain, with the wind, with everything. For a moment, she's not a historian anymore, she's a continuation. You feel it too, the loop closing. The melody that began as survival has become a full circle of remembrance. In the stillness, you can almost see them, faint shapes among the trees. Their outlines woven from mist and memory. Mira with her calm eyes. Elena with her restless smile. Celine clutching her ink-stained pages. They stand quietly, listening, as if satisfied that someone finally followed the trail home. And then they fade, not gone, just merged. The wind shifts. The rain slows. The forest hums one last time, like an exhale from the centuries themselves. Anais closes her eyes, whispers into the damp air, "Thank you." You can almost hear the answer carried on the wind. "No, thank you for remembering." The night folds around the forest like a soft curtain. When Anais finally steps out from under the canopy, her shoes wet with moss and soil, the air feels different, charged, alive, as if the earth itself has acknowledged her. She doesn't believe in miracles, but she does believe in continuity. And that's enough. Back in her hotel room, she opens her notebook, still damp from the mist. The pages smell faintly of wood smoke. On one of them, she writes, "They never disappeared. They just changed form. Every generation built a shelter for the next, a word, a song, a gesture. History calls them forgotten, but maybe forgetting is how they survived." She closes the book and sits by the window, staring at the lights flickering across the valley. Somewhere out there, the last fragments of the Greenwood rustle in the wind. and she feels an odd kind of peace. The next morning, her email inbox is overflowing. Overnight, her article "The Greenwood Hypothesis" has gone viral. Someone posted excerpts on a philosophy forum. Another turned her closing line into an image caption. The true archive of civilization lives not in libraries, but in people. It's been shared millions of times. The melody, the idea, the myth, all moving faster than any forest fire ever could. She scrolls through comments. This made me cry. I've been humming that song since childhood. My grandmother called it the women's prayer. So this is where it came from. The internet, chaotic and fickle, has unknowingly resurrected 1,000 years of memory in a single night. And somewhere, you can feel it, the forest hums again. Months pass. The world keeps turning. Conferences invite Anais to speak about her discovery. Though she never calls it that. I didn't discover anything, she says. I just remembered out loud. In one lecture, a student asks, "Do you think the forest women were real?" Anais smiles. As real as you're sitting there. But there's no proof, the student insists. Proof, she says gently, is just memory that learned to write. The room falls silent. Someone in the back begins to hum, softly, nervously, the old melody. Others join. Within minutes, the hall fills with sound. Not applause but a living echo. When it fades, Anais whispers, "You see? They're still teaching." Later that year, she travels to a global summit on cultural preservation. Her presentation is titled "Invisible Lineages: The Heritage of Care." Delegates from every continent sit in silence as she speaks about unnamed healers, uncredited midwives, the invisible threads binding all human compassion. She ends with a story, not from history, but from her own life. A week ago, she says, my mother was in hospital. A nurse sat with her all night, humming to keep her calm. When I thanked her, she said her mother taught her that tune. She didn't know where it came from, but I did. Her voice catches. That's the thing about memory. It doesn't need monuments. It needs mouths. Applause rises, not thunderous, but warm, human, real. Afterward, a young delegate from Ghana approaches her. We have a song like that too. He says, we call it the mother's breath. My grandmother says it came from the west wind. Anais laughs softly. Maybe it's the same wind, just carrying different words. You travel with her again. Through airports, trains, endless corridors of civilization pretending it invented connection. But everywhere she goes, the melody follows, in a busker's violin, in a street singer's hum, in the rhythm of children clapping in playgrounds. One night, she records a podcast about her research. What fascinates me most, she tells the interviewer, is that this melody has no author. It belongs to everyone. It might be the oldest collaboration in history. When asked what she thinks it means, she pauses. It means, she says, that kindness leaves fingerprints. At home, she begins writing a book. The title comes easily. Memoria non moritur. The first chapter opens with a sentence that feels like a heartbeat. This is not history. This is the echo of survival. As she writes, she sometimes catches herself humming again. Sometimes she swears she hears another voice humming back. Years later, when Anais grows old, her granddaughter finds her asleep in a chair by the window. Notebook open, pen resting against the last page. On it, in faint ink, she's written, "They outlived the fire. They outlived the crown. They outlived the silence." Every time a woman hums to calm a child, the forest breathes again. The girl hums the melody softly, not understanding why it feels sacred. Outside, the rain begins once more, a slow, steady rhythm on the glass, like the heartbeat of time itself, keeping count. And you realize, as the scene fades, that this isn't a story about loss anymore. It's about return. Because the Greenwood was never just a place. It was always a pulse, one that keeps echoing in every act of care. Every whispered comfort, every note of a song that refuses to die. Decades drift by, folding the world into new shapes. Technology grows like ivy across everything, glowing screens, synthetic voices, entire memories stored in clouds. Humanity has archived itself, digitized its heartbeat, compressed its emotions into data that can fit inside a phone. And yet, for all the ways the world has learned to record, it still forgets how to remember. You walk through a city built of glass and noise, where even silence has a soundtrack. Neon lights blink like restless eyes, reflecting in puddles that never see stars. Somewhere, an AI-generated lullaby plays in a baby's smart cradle, optimized for sleep efficiency. The ad says, "It works, maybe, but it sounds hollow, mechanical, soulless." Then, one night, a glitch. The AI lullaby system, a product designed by a startup that scraped millions of ancient melodies from global archives, begins to play something older. A tune no one coded intentionally. Slow, minor key, familiar. The baby's mother pauses mid-step. Her breath catches. "I know that song," she whispers, though she doesn't. It's Myra's song, fragmented through centuries of transmission. Now reborn from a machine that was supposed to forget the human fingerprints in its database. The melody spreads again, quietly at first, through sleep apps, meditation playlists, background soundscapes for focus and calm. People across the world listen to it every night without knowing what it is. Comments appear online. "This song feels ancient. It makes me cry for no reason. Does anyone know where this came from?" No one answers, because the answer isn't digital. But something happens. The lullaby's effect is different from other tracks. It's not algorithmic calm, it's emotional recall. People report vivid dreams, forests, candlelight, the scent of smoke and rosemary. Some wake up humming, some wake up crying. A neuroscientist in Tokyo studies the phenomenon, calling it inherited resonance. She writes in her paper, "Certain tonal patterns may evoke ancestral emotional imprints. Listeners exhibit physiological relaxation correlated with memory networks, even when the melody has no cultural context." She doesn't know she's describing the sound of collective survival. Meanwhile, a group of women artists collaborate on an online project called the Greenwood Code. They gather stories of forgotten female healers across history, painting, composing, filming, blending myth and data, poetry and science. The centerpiece of their exhibition is a holographic forest where visitors walk through digital mist and hear overlapping whispers, fragments of Myra's lullaby, sung in 100 voices. At the entrance, a sign reads, "Memory does not die, it adapts." People walk through and weep, though they don't understand why. One visitor, a young woman with earbuds around her neck, stands frozen in front of a holographic projection of firelight. She hears the song and feels seen. She texts her mother afterward. "We used to hum that when I was little. Do you remember?" Her mother replies, "No, sweetheart. You used to hum it to me." The circle continues. You wander through the exhibit after closing hours. The forest glows in artificial moonlight. Digital leaves shimmering with pixelated dew. Yet somehow, it feels alive. Like the old forest breathing again through technology's lungs. A voice plays through hidden speakers, a reading of an ancient line. They outlived the fire. They outlived the crown. They outlived the silence. And for the first time, it doesn't sound like history. It sounds like prophecy fulfilled. Outside, the city lights flicker as rain begins to fall, soft, rhythmic, patient, the kind of rain that carries memory in its cadence. You close your eyes and hear it merge with the distant hum of traffic until it becomes the same sound. The same pulse that began centuries ago with one woman tending to another's wounds by firelight. Now, that rhythm is everywhere, in the sound of electric trains, in heart monitors, in fingers tapping screens to send a kind word across the world. Humanity has built cathedrals of steel and code. But at its foundation, the same melody endures, the one born not of conquest, but compassion. Centuries of distance collapse into this moment, you, standing in the digital forest, surrounded by echoes of lives that refused to vanish. And suddenly, it's clear. The women of the past never needed to win wars or wear crowns. They conquered time instead. Because no matter how many empires rise or algorithms replace memory, the essence of their rebellion, care, resilience, tenderness, has become the default setting of the human heart. You can feel it now, every lullaby sung, every wound tended. Every whisper that says, "You'll be all right." They are all descendants of that first act of mercy beneath the burning sky. The screens dim, the holographic trees fade, but in the quiet that follows, one voice remains, soft, ageless, just above a whisper. We're still here. Every time someone chooses kindness, we live again. And the rain outside answers like applause. It begins in silence. The last section of time, the one we call now, is quieter than you'd expect. The noise of the world hasn't vanished, it's just faded into the background hum of everything that ever happened. Planes still cross the sky. Phones still buzz. Hearts still beat. But beneath it all, there's a stillness, something like the pause before a final breath. Or a memory returning home. The story has come full circle. You stand at the edge of what used to be a forest. Though now it's little more than wind and soil. The ground is soft under your feet. The air tinged with petrichor and ghosts. A digital plaque nearby marks the place. Site of the Greenwood Sanctuary. Circa 12th century. Home to the healers of the forest. Exact records lost. Influence eternal. You close your eyes and listen. There's no birdsong, no fire crackle, no distant cries of war. Just the whisper of the wind moving through grass that grows exactly where the altar once stood. And then, very faintly, you hear it. That song. Not from speakers, not from memory, from the air itself. The notes are low, slow, gentle, as if the earth has learned to hum. A group of people stand nearby, pilgrims of a different kind. Some wear headphones, some hold candles, some hold nothing but silence. They've come here not for religion or history, but for recognition, for connection. A woman in the crowd begins to hum. Barely audible. Another joins her. Then a man. Then a child. And slowly, the sound grows, not loud, but layered. The melody travels through them like breath shared between centuries. You look around and realize, no one is leading. No one is commanding. The song simply knows what to do. It weaves through languages, through time, through every throat and memory and heartbeat until it fills the air, not as music, but as belonging. For a moment, the entire world feels suspended in one note of understanding. And you remember them all. Elaine, bargaining her pride for mercy. Isolde, washing blood from her hands and not looking away. Elena, walking barefoot into the forest and never returning the same. Claire, whispering rebellion behind chapel walls. Celine, smuggling truth into lullabies. Mira, standing at the pyre, unafraid. Anais, finding their echoes centuries later, and giving them voice again. Every act, every whisper, every heartbeat led to this, the world finally listening without interruption. You think about how many wars tried to erase them, how many books forgot to mention them, how many statues were never carved. And yet, they won. Not through victory, through endurance. Their rebellion wasn't conquest, it was kindness. And that kind of defiance is immortal. The sky deepens into dusk. The group disperses, leaving only the sound of the wind brushing through the grass like fingers through hair. A few candles remain flickering, tiny replicas of ancient campfires. You walk to the center of the clearing, where the altar once stood. The moss is soft and luminous, faintly glowing under the twilight. You kneel and press your hand to the earth. It's warm. For a moment, it feels as though something beneath it stirs, a heartbeat. Slow and enormous. Not divine, not mystical, human, collective. The heartbeat of everyone who ever healed, forgave, or chose mercy when it wasn't deserved. You whisper into the ground, not sure who you're speaking to. Thank you. And, like before, something answers, not in words, but in sensation, a warmth spreading through your fingers, up your arm, into your chest. It feels like being remembered. You stay there until the stars begin to appear, one by one, like embers rekindled in the night sky. The wind softens, the earth quiets, the moment dissolves. And somewhere, everywhere, the song continues. In hospital corridors where machines beep softly like lullabies. In kitchens where mothers hum over soup. In classrooms where teachers speak gently to frightened children. In whispered apologies. In laughter shared after loss. In the pulse between compassion and survival. That is where the women live now. That is where the greenwood breathes. The rhythm slows. The night deepens. You can almost see the world itself exhale. The stars blur into fog. The ground cools beneath you. The hum fades, but doesn't vanish. It never does. You lie back and close your eyes. The story folds itself around you. Warm as a blanket, old as time. You can still hear it faintly, Myra's song. Elena's laughter. The soft crackle of a distant fire. The melody drifts through you, becoming slower, softer, more like breathing than sound. And then it becomes silence again, gentle, infinite, alive. Memory does not die. It simply learns to sing in other voices. Your eyelids grow heavy. The stars shimmer. The world hums you to sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.